what better ways to have a great moderator for such a session under the name of Jeremy Kleiman, who I'm happy to see again on screen. Hopefully we will see each other in person sometime this year, maybe next year. Time has gone by so fast. So the floor is yours.
Thanks, Sultan, and thanks for having me back. I had to miss the last quarterly update due to scheduling problems, but happy to be back and happy to be moderating this panel with two of my good friends. It's always a pleasure to be involved in a panel with Bill Pascrell III and Martin Lycka, because if you've seen them speak or been on any of these webinars before where they've spoken, you know that I don't have to do anything. They both have a lot to say. So welcome to our two panelists, Martin Lycka, Senior Vice President of Regulatory Affairs and Responsible Gambling for the U.S. for Entain, and Bill Pascrell III, affectionately known, as you all know, as BP3 from Princeton Public Affairs. So thanks, guys, for doing this again. So as we've done in the past, there's a lot to talk about. I thought we'd go around the map, hit some of the big U.S. states, talk about what's happening, what's on the horizon, recent developments, and then move on and talk about some other topics, legislative and regulatory news in terms of advertising, responsible gaming, and maybe if we have time, we can touch on some new products maybe that are coming into the market with regulatory approval. So before we jump in, I'll hand it off to both of you if you want to make any intro remarks before we start doing some geography.
Martin,
want to go first?
No, you go. I insist you go first.
That's very kind. Awesome shirt, by the way, Bill.
Beauty.
Exactly. Very awesome shirt, Bill. Jeremy's not too shabby either. On a serious note, thanks for having me, Zoltan and Jeremy. It's always a pleasure indeed and a privilege to be on a panel with my Jersey brothers from other mothers, namely Bill and Jeremy. And yeah, I would love to take this opportunity to walk the audience through the latest shenanigans on the regulatory side of things in the US. Bill,
that's it? You're done?
That's it. That's it for now, because Jeremy will have questions that we will need to tackle. So that's a very short introduction, expressing my gratitude.
Martin, you've never been so concise. Wow.
I know. I've been learning from you.
America's. Oh yeah. I'm real concise. I'm just looking at some of the people, and I know we're also streaming, but some of the people that are logged on. I'm quite shocked that folks like Michael Golub and Lou Ragacki have the time to listen to our nonsense, right? I mean, because they're drinking out of a fire hose, trying to get multiple books launched before the start of the NFL. And obviously there was a nice announcement yesterday. The DG is always ahead of the curve. So really just kibitzing, giving them a shout out. I also want to say hi to our dear friend, Chris Soriano, amongst many others. Jeremy, thank you. It's a pleasure. Jeremy was kind enough to introduce me to Zoltan years ago. I want to thank Gaming Americas for having us. There is so much going on in the industry. I think what we're probably going to do, in addition to talking about the macro issues and the importance of changes in payment processing and AML issues, responsible gaming being obviously critical, perhaps get into a little bit about other verticals like esports, fixed odds horse racing, et cetera. But now that Massachusetts is finally across the line, and Martin, we were just up there not too long ago. They're probably going to launch within the next few months. Certainly not by NFL. All eyes are now refocused, and appropriately so, in California. So I'd like to talk about that, Jeremy. We can give an update on what's going on in Florida, although that continues to be an unfortunate mess. And then talk about some of the other states that are onboarding, like Maryland and Ohio and Kansas, et cetera. So thank you very much. Pleasure to be here with you, Martin and Jeremy.
Hey, so Bill, you mentioned Massachusetts first. Why don't we start with that one? What do you think about the very deliberative, slow approach that the regulator in Massachusetts is taking? Legislation passed. They don't seem to really be in a hurry. They likely want to get it right in their minds. Have started, stakeholder meetings, but have made it clear like they're in no rush. And is that keeping an eye on the calendar, football season, and so on? Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? And how much of this do you think is being driven by, the Massachusetts concerns about, advertising and RG and those things? I know that on the land-based side, those have been big concerns since the beginning in Massachusetts.
Yeah, Jeremy, Martin and I have done a host of work there, as well as talked to national media organizations and industry-based. Let me say this in all fairness. They got it over the goal line just in time. As you know, the 60 days was expiring for the joint committee to kind of come up with a final proposal. They sorted through a lot of major issues, like credit cards and in-state sports betting on collegiate, and the tax rate, right? Those are not easy issues to address. But listen, let's not forget that the governor just signed the bill, within the last 10 days. And the committee just got it done in early August. I want to give a huge amount of credit to Massachusetts regulators for not rushing to market. The worst thing you can do, and the New Jersey DGE, which I continue to believe is the global model for how to get it right, is the best example of that. You're not accomplishing anything by rushing to get this launched. They want to be methodical. I'd rather they get it right than get it fast. And now a lot of operators don't want to hear that, but what difference does it make if they launch 2 weeks into the NFL or 8 weeks into the NFL, as long as they get it right? And there are concerns not only about RG and other issues surrounding licensing and compliance, but there's concerns about responsible gaming and advertising, as you pointed out. And like, it's so fun, right, Jeremy, from the perch at which you sit and perhaps at which Martin and I sit, because we hear both sides of the equation. We hear the regulator side, and we also hear the operator side. And fortunately, in most jurisdictions in the US, there's good, healthy collaboration and exchange. I think we're probably 2+ months away from a launch, and I think that that's the right approach. Get it right, do it right. I'm not saying take your time and slow it down, but it would be a huge embarrassment. It's a great state with a great legacy, a great culture of sports betting. You don't want to rush to market. You want to get the regs right. You want to make sure it's compliant. And I think the best is yet to come for Massachusetts.
If I may, I would totally echo Bill's comments and not going off tangent, but it's great to have an opportunity to talk about my spiritual home of Massachusetts, the home of one of the world's all-time best sporting franchise, namely the Boston Bruins, of course. Great hockey team, and now the citizens of Massachusetts will have an opportunity to bet on that team and many other teams that are based in the state of Massachusetts. On a more serious note, yes, I don't think that the delay would be a bad thing. I appreciate that some operators may be a little frustrated. On the other hand, and I'm sure we will come on to that, everybody's got the likes of Kansas and Maryland on their plate, plus the California referendum. So it's not as though we'd have nothing to do and no licensing processes, as Jeremy is only too acutely aware of, to go through a number of hoops to jump through. So really, yeah, the bottom line is that the Massachusetts legislature and government deserve a lot of plaudits for having gotten it across the line. It hasn't been an easy negotiations. Indeed, as Bill has pointed out, a number of issues to address. I would suggest they have definitely found a workable compromise on the tax side of things. What I would also like to highlight and call out is the fact that there will be up to 7 mobile, or to speak American, mobile-only licenses to be had on top of the licenses that will be tethered to the Massachusetts-based properties. So that is very progressive indeed in terms of responsible gambling. It has been a hot button issue and it will continue being so. And Massachusetts, owing to their tradition, will lay a lot of emphasis on making sure that their consumers are protected, because we could be spending a lot of time discussing the merit, or rather the lack of merit, connected with banning the use of credit cards for gambling purposes. I believe that last time we did this, the 3 of us happened to have been in Seattle, Washington, and then we raised that issue. Well, I suppose that might have been the price to pay. I don't think it's, especially in the US context, that this would have been the smartest and the most pragmatic decision, but so be it. And my final point about NCAA and the restrictions, and now I need to be treading very carefully, walk the tightrope. Michael and Luke, as DGE, have honored us with their, graced us and honored us with their presence, because they got a similar rule. But at the very least, there will be betting markets on Massachusetts-based college teams when playing in tournaments and all that. So that's sort of a middle ground. Long story short, I believe Massachusetts and its sports betting market has a very bright future ahead of it. And to Bill's point, barring the end of the world, there will be another football season next year. It would be great if they get it all across the line by the time the Super Bowl, then March Madness, and then leading into the Masters and the summer and what have you. But yeah, take your time to get it right.
I agree, Martin. And we've seen that in other markets where there's been, tremendous pressure, 60 days or 90 days between, passage of legislation and the beginning of the football season, and tremendous political and commercial pressure on regulators to get the launch done in literally a matter of weeks. And we've seen disasters along the way. So I would think as long as there's a universal launch date so that, no operator is disadvantaged, what difference does it make if,
Exactly.
if they get it right and launch halfway through the season, right?
That's right. That's right.
So no, we're in agreement there. All right, let's jump to the West Coast and talk about the big Enchilada, California. Bill, you want to take that one and tell us where we are, and then maybe we can talk about why all of the sports leagues have not jumped in and been very vocal in support of the referendum.
Yeah, thank you, Jeremy. This is obviously being viewed by many in the industry as the crown jewel, right? It's the 8th largest economy. It's the largest populated state, a very liberal state, obviously, politically. I am not surprised, but I am disappointed that the industry, which we are all a part of, not casting aspersions, but they do deserve a little bit of a slap, didn't come better to the table to work with the tribes. The tribal initiative, Prop 26, is really stands a better chance of passage than 27, but typically either both fail or both pass, right? Typically when there's similar ballot referendums historically for gaming. The tribes have immense local political power and juice. They are politically organized. This is one of the things, Jeremy, that you have worked very hard on. Martin has worked very hard on, and I have tried to also take your lead and work behind you to try to organize the industry better. I would have rather seen no ballot referendum than what's going on now. It's not a good look. 82% of the electorate, not those that are going to vote, but the broader electorate, know that the ballot referendums are on the electoral docket, right? They know they're going to vote on November 7th. And I think turnout, just globally, having nothing to do with this issue, is going to be down. People are very tired and weary of national politics and politics in general. Maybe there's certain issues like Mar-a-Lago and abortion, the Dodd case, guns, etc., that maybe have spiked some interest. But when 82% of the electorate knows these initiatives are on the ballot, and only 32% in the most recent polls are willing to vote yes on the industry-backed model, Prop 27, with 75 days to go before Election Day, it's not a good look. $100 million was spent to just get it on a ballot, and then oodles of money, upwards of 60 so far million, have been spent on advertising for Prop 27, and a concomitant amount has been spent by the tribes negating Prop 27, vehemently attacking it, and going after the non-mobile tribal initiative, right? Retail only. I mean, I would have thought more benefit and opportunity would have been to sit down, clock the doors, and try to cut a deal than what's happened here. Another thing, here's another point. Governor Gavin Newsom's right-hand political man, Mr. Click, is running this ballot referendum campaign for the industry. He is a superior political strategist and advisor and operator, but he hasn't had a lot of experience with ballot referendums. And Jeremy, you know this, Mark knows this, but perhaps the audience doesn't. Ballot referendums are very different than running a campaign supporting XYZ for mayor, U.S. Senate, governor, et cetera, dog catcher. It's a very different model. Major League Baseball comes out 10 days ago to support the ballot referendum. I don't think a voter gives a hoot at what Major League Baseball has done on this, although I respect MLB. They're a great organization, massive integrity, good sorts. And yes, baseball still remains a pretty popular pastime. I don't think that's going to move the dial. The Prop 27 ballot referendum, even though the entry license fee is massive, $100 million license fee is just wow. And, you know, there are going to be some winners and losers for sure. The problem is the ballot proposition as crafted has a wonderful campaign theme behind it that they're not pushing. And what is that? It's the fact that the majority of the tax realized from sports betting will go to helping the homeless, which is a massive problem throughout the country, and particularly in California, where there's very bifurcated economic status there. And I would have been promoting that. Now, let me make a few final points here, because I know Martin is deeply involved in this too. I'm actually going to be talking to the campaign and maybe even seeing Gavin Newsom, although we're trying to figure out schedules, when Martin and I are in Laguna Beach in a couple of weeks at another conference. It's hard to believe that there wasn't a deal able to be made between the tribes and the industry. But what's even harder to believe, the California Democratic Committee, which is the most powerful and strongest Democratic Party in America, voted this down. They're not supporting Prop 27. They're neutral on the tribal initiative. Not only that, the NAACP, which is a massive voter acceleration organization, civil rights organization, they're against the industry-backed referendum. And the third leg on the stool, which is a monster political coalition The teachers union of California is against it. How the heck is that even possible? The industry needs to realize and do some self-reflection on their political and GR approach. I don't see at this stage, hovering around 31, 32%, how the industry-backed referendum passes with only 75 days to go. You can keep throwing money, good money after bad, but you're going to really have to change the messaging.
Probably too late for that. To me, this looks like, death by, circular firing squad. I agree with you. How the commercial industry and the tribes couldn't have figured out a way to speak with one voice on this, and everyone gets something out of it, is beyond me. So, Martin, what's your take?
Similar to yours. Yeah, it is very fair to say that unfortunately the relationship between what turned out to be the two sides of the divide, but ought not to have been, has not been very harmonious. That's despite the fact that the tribes have been baked into the bill that props up, if you pardon the pun, Prop 27. So they would take a part of their play. But indeed, as Bill has pointed out, their political sway, their political clout in the state of California is enormous, a massive force to be reckoned with. And indeed, it is very telling that the California Democratic Committee might need to call Pelosi, Bill, or I'm sure you can do it, not me, have a quiet word with her to cut a deal in one way or another. But yeah, it is quite telling that not even these guys who are ultra liberal, at least most of them, would not be supporting that. And I do appreciate that it at least would appear that it may require a leap of faith to be able to link sports betting, which despite all the efforts of a lot of the people in the audience and on this Zoom call and of course beyond, it still comes associated with some baggage and stigma. So perhaps there's only a very tenuous link between homelessness and sports betting, and some of the California voters may be thinking that the two are mutually exclusive, but ultimately at the risk of sounding cynical, and Bill made that point as well, the levels of poverty on the West Coast as a whole, especially in California, are just horrendous. They're abject. So if there's money to be had arising out of no matter what initiative, then if I were a Californian voter, I may be biased, having been with the industry for a number of years, but I would be prepared to at least consider it, if not take it. But I agree that the bottom line is that if 75 days left to play with, it is indeed borderline whether it's not too late by now, but we may want to throw a kitchen sink at it, do as much as we can, have a very quick reset and rethink, and try to be more strategic to make the most of the time that is left, because then otherwise, in all likelihood, we might need to be waiting until 2024.
We'll be having this conversation again 2 years from now, probably.
And Jeremy, it's also, I think, important to note, because albeit obvious to some of us, and particularly me being involved in politics my whole life, it's not fair to compare what's going on in California to other jurisdictions. Like, for example, we do not have federally recognized tribes in New Jersey. We did not have to deal with that important issue. I'm not dismissive of that. What I think is unfortunate is that the industry needed to understand that not only are the tribes important because they have been given certain rights because of past practice, where they were certainly mistreated, and I'm putting that mildly. They need to be recognized and have a seat at the table and respected, to go to the table and say, listen, we know you're not embracing of online gaming, but here's how online can complement offline, and we can make a deal together, right? The sad truth is half of the industry, and I'm talking about not the top tier companies like BetMGM, FanDuel, DraftKings, Penn National, Barstool, Caesars, PlayUp, PointsBet, all those guys, right? They're all in on this. But then you have the next tier of companies, many of whom are not consumer recognized yet, but they're building, who will benefit from this failing, because those companies would struggle to get market access at $100 million a clip, right? The other sad truth is that every Democrat running up and down the ballot, and it's a Democratic state, not because I say so, but, you know, look at the congressional delegation, the way they vote, gave Biden a 6 million plurality in the state, go on and on. Every Democrat on the campaign trail now running hard to try to get reelected or run to defeat an incumbent Republican can't support the ballot referendum because the parties come out against it. The NAACP's against it, the teachers. So what big organization other than the Major League Baseball is saying this is important and here's why? So, you know, I still think there's a chance, though slim, to turn the corner, but they got to be, by Labor Day, they have to remessage and get it out there. And it's more than just advertising and billboards and signs. It's knocking on doors and dragging your voter out, because this is going to be a very low turnout year nationally.
All right. I think we beat California to death. That was good. I mean, that we're dealing with political realities. And I love you guys never sugarcoat it. That's why it's so much fun. All right, let's bounce back over to the East Coast and talk about Maryland. Maybe potentially a more positive story, but who knows, right? So there is a 45-day window, I believe. I don't think it's open yet, to apply for the online sports wagering skins. Maryland is authorizing up to 60 online licenses. Is that way too many for a state of that size?
Yeah, I'm happy to go first. And yeah, the short answer to your question is that I think it is way too many, though I should wish the best of luck to all the successful applicants once they are in the market. I know, as you know, Bill knows, I'm sure the learned audience will know as well, there's still hundreds of online gambling sites in the likes of the UK, but that would appear to be an anomaly across the board all around the globe. And let's not forget that it's a country of 60 plus million. So having all those licenses subject to licensing fees, and of course everybody will have to jump through all the hoops of the licensing process, which takes time, requires a lot of effort, and comes with a price tag of its own, then I would suggest to anybody out there that, well, yeah, go for it, go apply for a license, but do your calculation first. Now, is it really worth that? And don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to be poo-pooing the Maryland regulatory regime. It's certainly preferable to have a high number of licenses to having a very restricted, a very limited number of licenses. But as I've said, I believe the answer to your question, Jeremy, is that it might be just way too many for a market of this size. Plus, indeed, Maryland has somewhat struggled with launching the process, and the final quirk that needs to be factored in is the requirement around the majority-owned minority businesses, which in itself, don't get me wrong, is a very, very sound idea. But from what I'm hearing, there really hasn't been a clear guidance as to how that requirement can be met, which I suppose may be a wider theme that pervades some of the existing and potentially also the upcoming regulations. Put these requirements in, but I would appeal to all the regulators to be ready, to be able to provide guidance on what these requirements actually mean And how? Because there's a mutual interest. They will want operators in the market, and the operators want to be in the market. So they're keen on complying with all the applicable requirements, but they do need to know how. So I will leave it there.
Yeah, no, let's talk about that for a second more though, because, and I think we talked about that minority ownership requirement in the past, right? It's, you know, well-intentioned. I think, you know, nobody can argue against it in theory, but the implementation of it in practice, it makes no sense. I mean, there is no clear guidance. You know, you're sort of in some ways forcing a square peg into a round hole, right? Where operators have to partner with, you know, in theory, investors that know nothing about the business. But what I've seen is, you know, it's more of a, but nobody's investing anything, right? Everyone's cutting deals with, you know, a minority partner in Maryland just so they can tick the box and meet the requirement, and, you know, giving them a very limited or no role really in the business with some economic upside just for, you know, sort of waving the flag for that operator. So, you know, to me, it's in theory makes a lot of sense. In practice, makes zero sense.
Well, Jeremy, I understand what you're saying, but I want to take a different approach to it. This is straight up, and like you say, we don't mince words. This is straight up affirmative action. I think it's important to recognize that it's sometimes hard to bring diversity into various industries and less forced. So you got to pay the price for past practice. I am very proud, and I'm going to toot my horn on this one, to get the first majority owned gaming company licensed in Tennessee, first in U.S. history, with Wager. They're in exchange. Sorry about that. They're in exchange, and they're doing well. And it's a company run by Mario Malve and Ileana Eshkenazi, both of whom are from South America. And it's a true majority company. I don't think it's untenable to say that you want to attract investment and opportunity for minorities who really have not been prevalent in the gaming industry. They really have not. Women and minorities still are at the tail end, not representative of what the demographic groups are. I get that that's not always popular for those of us who come from privileged backgrounds, quite candidly, but it's a necessary step. I give Governor Hogan so much credit. Again, he's a Republican. Unfortunately, he's not running for re-election, nor is Charlie Baker, thanks to Mr. Trump, which is unfortunate because they're two phenomenal individuals, both of whom may consider running for president. Who knows? But I think the intent is where the focus needs to be. And if you look at the intent of the legislation and the requirements for minority inclusion, you can get there. You can do it in a right way. And it will make a hill of a beans difference at the end of the day. Final point, and this is something that Zoltan just cued to me. We have over 1,000 viewers. At least 10 minutes ago we did, and I think the numbers continue to grow. So hopefully we're not diminishing that number, but that's awesome.
That's great. All right. A couple of states we want to hit. We're starting to run out of time. We're about halfway through, and then we have a bunch of other stuff we want to talk about. So just real quick, Bill, maybe you can just give an update on Florida, another big state. We've been at a stalemate, start and stop in Florida. What do you see on the horizon from a legal point of view in terms of litigation? And is that going to get back on track?
Well, I think, the long process of federal litigation, hung up on the National Tribal Gaming Act. The courts are considering. I believe in the final analysis, and full disclosure, I do represent Hard Rock. I've done a lot of work with them across the globe, including in Florida. I believe that Jim Allen and Governor DeSantis have a strategy that has initially hit a major bump in the road, but I think they're on track. And I also think they're not putting all their eggs in the litigation basket. They're also in constant communication, as is ironically the Attorney General of the state, with, I'm sure, the blessing of Ron DeSantis, the governor, in collaboration with the Biden administration to maybe look at some clarification, declaratory judgment on the act that's causing the mischief. Now, we know that the rest of the industry is not happy about this. They want to be able to get into the market. The Hard Rock has an exclusive in Florida, and that's because of the compact with the state and the Seminole tribe. But I believe, I've been wrong before, but nobody believed when I said 13 years ago we were going to legalize sports betting and get PASPA repealed. Everybody thought, laughed me out of the room, as well as when I was arguing for online casino and poker in Jersey and then in. I think Ron DeSantis and Jim Allen have a good game plan. It's not going to happen overnight. It could take another year or 18 months, but I think ultimately they're going to win. The only thing that can get in the way of that is Ron DeSantis losing his election. Christ, former Governor Christ, who was a Republican, switched parties, now a member of Congress. He's running. He just won overwhelmingly the Democratic primary there. DeSantis has $132 million in the bank. Christ has now got a kind of fundraise. You got Val Demings running against Marco Rubio. There's a lot of change going on. Democrats have always come close. They've never been able to get it over the goal line in statewide elections in modern history. But remember, DeSantis only beat Gillum by 32,000 votes, less than 1%. If DeSantis were to lose, this would upset the whole apple cart and they'd have to reset. But I don't see that happening right now.
Martin, do you have anything any words of wisdom on Florida before we jump to the Midwest? Hearing
Well,
none?
to your point about us not sugarcoating anything, I would be as daring as to say that it's unfortunately been a mess. I respect the decision of Governor DeSantis to have granted the Seminoles exclusive rights, but that doesn't seem to have worked out. So I suppose looking at the way forward and brushing aside all the political shenanigans that Bill has just very pertinently alluded to, I think it would be great for the sake and sanity of all of us if this, what will hopefully turn out to be an initial issue, it would be great if it gets resolved, things start falling into place, and then perhaps be it DeSantis or whoever may be in charge, because of course he may run for president next time around, who may be in charge in the next couple of years, having observed the evolution of that market with exclusive rights, may want to consider whether besides those rights or whether there's a way of accommodating the other operators into the existing system. But as I've said, long story short, they will need to resolve the initial issue first and get all their ducks in a row in that regard before they, in my view, can move on and start considering where to go next.
I agree. All right. Let's talk for a second about Kansas, right? So that's one of the latest states that is moving forward. And now we have this situation where the regulator has put out draft regulations and they need to be approved by the AG, and the AG is saying, hey, hold on, wait a minute, not so fast. I have a bunch of concerns. And that's sort of playing out publicly, which I think is a little odd and is not really a good look. What are you guys hearing about that? And what kind of delays that may cause? How do you think that's going to play out?
It's indeed, if I may go first, Bill, sorry. It's been very bizarre washing all the dirty linen in the public, although I do understand that by now the AG has seen light and has given his green light. So the market, which is of course great, as President Trump and his supporters would have fought for the Kansas City Chiefs, except that, of course, Kansas City happens to be in misery that has not regulated. But it will be great for the state of Kansas. So the latest would appear to be that the regulation has been greenlit, and the market will open on the 1st of September with a full launch intended to have taken place by the start of the football season. Again, Jeremy, to your very pertinent point earlier, does this mean rushing it all? Of course, the industry and the authorities have been at it for a while. Everybody's been getting ready. And had they waited for a few more weeks, I don't think that it would have made a hell of a lot of a difference. Had the market launched, or if the market launched only in the 3rd or the 4th week of the football season, but then great, it's another new kid on the block. So that's something that we should be applauding and that we should welcome.
And there's a market, Martin, that to you that means anything, just based on market size and population. And it's a relatively small state. Is this one that the industry should be taking a victory lap? Trying to look at what's the population of Kansas?
Yeah, I don't think that victory lap would need to be too long. It's good to have yet another state with sensible regulation. Of course, it's nothing earth-shattering, to be fair, but then I suppose, and we may or may not move on to it, because yes, we seem to be running out of time, but also from the iGaming perspective and the hope that at some point that regulatory efforts will catch fire, I would suggest that the more states, especially in the Midwest, that have regulated sports betting, the higher the chances that iGaming regulation will finally come out of hibernation.
Well, we can all hope. We can all hope. By the way, the population of Kansas is about 3 million, for what it's worth. All right, guys, let's jump to Nebraska. Is what's the latest on Nebraska? Do you guys have any updates there?
Well, I believe it's ticking along there. So, but again, just like Kansas, Nebraska, with all due respect to all the Nebraskans and all the fans of Nebraska, it's probably not a state you can write too much home about. That's in the spirit of what I've just said. The more states, the merrier, and the overall opportunity keeps growing. And I believe that's possibly a message to convey, because I believe a lot of people would agree with me that by now, with 30 plus states having regulated sports betting, not necessarily mobile or online sports betting, that's 20 plus 25 states. Now, just like we used to in Europe, we started hitting the rough patch of states that would not necessarily be that easy to convince that they should regulate sports betting. I'm sure the likes of Minnesota, North Carolina, Georgia, even Alabama, and of course Texas, they will have another go at it, but it's not as though this was a slam dunk. So I suppose what I'm trying to say is that with the likes of, and of course Missouri, with the likes of Kansas and Nebraska on the board now, it does show that even the states that historically would have been either opposed or not necessarily that excited about regulating sports betting, that it is actually possible and may create some impetus for all the other states, again, brushing the Utahs and the Hawaiis of this world aside, that may be considering whether it's a good thing to regulate. And I don't think they would necessarily be swayed, these states, by what might have happened, with all due respect, or what has happened in the likes of New York, Pennsylvania and all the East or West Coast states. We're talking, if I may put it that way, about real America, the middle or the South. So they would need to draw inspiration from their peers. So long story short, I believe this is the strategic value of having the likes of Nebraska and Kansas and states like this, Iowa on board.
Good point. Good point. All right, guys, we only have about 15 minutes left. Let's talk a little bit about some of the other hot topics, not necessarily state by state, but advertising, which seems to be the flavor of the month, right? I mean, legislators in Colorado and I think Virginia have recently made noise about restricting advertising. We know it's a big issue in Massachusetts. The New York AG, recently sort of gave a warning to the industry about, excesses in advertising. What is your take on where we are in the U.S. with advertising? Operators have had more or less a free hand to this point. And we've all heard these kinds of discussions at other conferences over the last, 6 or 12 months. Are we heading towards a UK type environment here? And, what should the industry be doing itself to possibly head that off?
Bill, want to go?
Okay, I don't want to interrupt you. I thought you were going to jump in. This is the issue that Martin and I have been working so rigorously on. I mean, it's tied and tethered to responsible gaming. Right now, there's no material advertising restrictions, but there is a lot of talk by the regulators because of the massive amounts of advertising. I mean, I was just up in Saratoga last week. Deputy Director Rogacki was up there too, speaking on a host of topics. And I did a panel on RG, and one of the members of the panel, in addition to the Massachusetts Problem Gambling Association head and the New York Problem Gambling Association head, was the New York Media Association. And they're doing quite well, right? But they need to understand that in order to sustain that revenue stream, you've got to be ahead of the curve and make sure that the regulators aren't getting concerned about hyper advertising. So the way to prevent it, I think, is very difficult to achieve, but it's further discipline and self-regulation. Some of the advertising that's been going on across the country, we see it here, right, in the New York metropolitan area where the three of us are living, is just extraordinary, and a lot of it's obnoxious. And we're having regulators monitor the penetration into gambling addiction in the United States and in each state. And as that continues to increase and become more problematic, that's when solutions by regulators come about that the industry is never going to like, which is, clamping down on advertising, clamping down on spin rates and time. And so the only way to avoid that is to get ahead of the curve and understand that problem gambling, responsible gambling, is the biggest challenge we have, and it's the only way to create a more sustainable industry.
Yeah, Bill, as always, is absolutely spot on. If I perhaps may add a couple of points, I would suggest that what I would call the honeymoon period of the US sports betting industry is coming to an end. Won't be a crushing end, because the market's been phenomenally successful, and it will very likely continue going from strength to strength. But indeed, to Bill's point, we do need to start weaving in factors related to the long-term sustainability of the markets and, of course, the market as a whole, because the most successful TV markets are, of course, nationwide. And as I'm sure the audience would have already noticed, the likes of Colorado, West Virginia, Tennessee, they've all started phasing out the initially introduced full deductibility of bonuses. So that's a big signal that something is happening, that something is changing, and I'm certain that this will, by definition, transform the industry, because all this will need to be reflected in the applicable business models. So really, that's the first point I was going to make, that that changes are already afoot that will have a massive bearing and impact on what the market, the sports betting market, will look like even 2, 3, let alone 5, 10 years from now. The other point that I would make relates to the practicalities of advertising. The UK example may be a bit misleading, because that issue had been brewing and then it for a while and then it bubbled over. But I do see similarities, especially regarding the frequency, or if you will, the volume of sports betting or by the gambling related advertising. And with the football season coming up, I'm sure that we will be exposed to all this even more in the weeks and months to come. But yeah, ultimately, to address Bill's other point, I totally agree. Yes, the industry needs to get their act together, be prepared to self-regulate, work with the regulators to make sure that we collectively find an efficient way to address the frequency of those adverts, and also address the other key issue, which is to make sure that the adverts are not misleading. The so-called, the alleged $5,000 risk-free bets, inherently no bets are risk-free. From the practical perspective, and that will be my final point, what I believe it will boil down to is frustration oozing from within the public that might end up putting pressure on the broadcasters that will be only too keen to protect their golden goose being the broadcasts, their golden goose being advertising, full stop. I suppose, cynically speaking, the broadcasters don't really care as long as they're paid, whether they're promoting sports betting products or whether they're promoting insurance or whether they're promoting diapers. So if the signal from the public and from their audience happens to be too much sports betting, then they will start cutting it out or giving sports betting less space. So I think that there's a practical answer to this issue that has definitely been brewing for some time now.
And related to advertising, just the overall RG issue. New Jersey DG recently, put out guidelines to the operators on what their expectations are and what an operator's obligations are in terms of RG. Can you talk a little bit about that, Martin? Additional staffing that's required, use of technology, and those kinds of things. And is this? And I take it that the industry was collaborating, was part of those discussions. And talk about that approach versus having it crammed down your throat with hard requirements by some regulator.
Yeah, absolutely. And the bottom line is that this is the way to go. Ties back with the points about the long-term sustainability of the US markets that all three of us have made on this panel. We're probably sounding like broken records because that's what we keep talking about, but that's because it's of such cardinal importance to the industry as a whole. And yeah, once again, I'm not saying that only because some of them happen to be on this call. The DG deserves lots of credit and plaudits for once again having blazed the trail. And I believe that there is a reasonable expectations that the standards or their permutations will start cascading down to the other states. Again, it is the way to go. DG's doors, as always, have been open. They've consulted with the industry because ultimately we are all trying to achieve the same thing. We do need to protect our customers because it's not only the right thing to do, it's also a smart business strategy. So I do believe that we will get to see more and more effort in this space because it is inevitable to give credit to other regulators. We've already mentioned that Massachusetts has already laid a lot of emphasis on all things responsible gambling. The same goes for the likes of Ohio. And then I reckon that further down the track, other existing legislations will start going through this transformation, and new legislations will also have picked up on this absolutely crucial theme and topic.
Good. We only have a couple minutes left. Bill, maybe you're going to get the last word here. You want to touch on any of the RG stuff? You want to just talk for a few minutes about maybe some new, innovative, products that we're starting to see come into the industry? I think, New Jersey is about to launch 2 betting exchanges, which I believe will be the first state to do that. Are we going to see more of that? Fixed odds, we all know you've been involved with that. Are we going to see that expand into other markets? Esports, just give a kind of wrap up if you can,
Sure,
on where we are with some of those new products.
Sure. New Jersey will not be the first state to launch exchange. Tennessee was. They launched the wager exchange back a year and a half ago, but New Jersey will have 2 entrants into the market. They just certified their tech, and they're going to launch in time for football season, which is great. DGE has had such an incredible amount of work to do to get a number of books and new product offerings into the space in time for football season, which always seems to be this important benchmark. I just want to say that there's also some pretty interesting technology and new products coming in that I think are really innovative and really important for the RG space. Company that Martin and I are working with, like My Wager Score and Give Better, involving Bo Gray and the great Charles Oakley. It's a serious effort backed by a serious professional athlete to address gambling addiction. Similarly, Jeremy, to the way you have a credit score for a mortgage, this is a wager score reaching out to college-age kids before they reach 21 to get them socialized and educated, and to appreciate not just the athletes, but the student body, the general body, of the vagaries and the problems when you get into addictive behavior. Gambling is a hospitality. It should be treated that way. It should not be treated, I don't want to sound like a lecturer, but that's what we're doing here. It should never, ever be used as a coping mechanism. We've seen what's happened with that in the UK. We have a spot-on lesson to learn from that. So I'm excited about Martin's technology with the ARC system that Entain has come out with. By the way, the DGE's announcement in May, which was after 9 months of laborious work that they really don't have the time to do, they made RG a priority. They get it. It's not just checking a box so you have an 800 number at the bottom of your consumer-facing page. It's having an RG lead and having technology in place that's going to have pause play and different metrics in play to watch and monitor the player. Remember, and all my casino clients bitch when I say this, I'm sorry, it's true. Maybe it's the master of the obvious, I don't know. But this industry, the online industry, cannot treat the problem gambler the way historically the casino industry treated the problem gambler. And you know, and Martin knows, and most of our audience, the addicted gambler was treated as a VIP customer. Here's another chip, here's another marker, here's another bonus bet. Keep at it. This industry is not sustainable going down that model. And final point, I guess we have maybe 30 seconds. New Jersey, yet again, first state in the nation to launch fixed odds horse racing, which, as everyone knows, perhaps, or are learning, is like a bet on a sport event. The odds you get are the odds you bet. It's been successful. We launched it on May 6th at Monmouth. The mobile app is being reviewed now by the DG and will be launched soon by bet makers at Monmouth Park. It's going to be called Monmouth Bets. Now we're starting to bring external content into the state, trying to get approvals on that. And I believe Colorado will be the next state in the nation to do it. Bet makers is out. I couldn't be there because of this commitment, but they're out in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And I know you do a little work with them too, Jeremy, and rightfully so because of your reach. They're out talking, invited by the regulators in New Mexico to talk about how to bring that on there. Louisiana, Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York. The bill's been dropped in New York. Senator Adobo's going to move it. Why is it important to talk about fixed odds? If we can bet on Russian table tennis in this country during the pandemic, imagine 40,000 horse races coming in. It's good for the horse race industry. It's good for the sports betting operators, and it's good for all the stakeholders, and it will keep a wonderful sporting industry alive.
All right. And that was the last word because we are out of time. I want to thank Bill and Martin. As always, you guys did a great job. And we're going to turn it back over to Zoltan.
Thank you, everybody.
Jeremy, Martin, Bill, thank you so much. Yeah, as an update for the US, you know that brand Almost Friday beers. You probably know that they are very viral over the past year. They just signed a content deal with BetMGM, so that's for the football season. They're most probably going to be a funny season this year, thanks to these guys over there.
Not much hope for the Patriots or the Giants.